Om Jnana Timirantasya Jnanam Jana Shalakaya Chakshur Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha.
Now we are at the temple of Trivikram, Vamana Dev. This is a wonderful place, so by wandering around from place to place we can remember all various leelas of the Lord and His devotees. Vamana, of course, means small, dwarf. But in this temple he doesn't look very small. It's a very big form. Of course, it's not nearly as big as the form that Vamana Dev took when he expanded himself to cover the universe. You can just imagine that he asked for 3 steps and then he started going bigger. All the demons might have been thinking, when's he going to stop growing? This looks pretty dangerous. But he didn't stop growing until he was, his footsteps were enough in 2 steps to cover the whole universe. So it's a well-known story and a very sweet story. Here the priest was pointing out to us the head of Bali Chakravarti and saying how, or telling us that by placing his foot on Bali Maharaj's head, he cut down the ego of Bali Maharaj. Well, that's one perspective. But at least as we have heard it from Srila Prabhupada, Bali Maharaj had, by offering his head, he had already given up his egoism. If any false egoism was there, he had already, just like Bhakti Thakur says, this Sarvasva Prama Charane Sangha, I have offered everything at your lotus feet. So we don't find in the Bhagavatam that Vamana Dev forcefully took Bali Maharaj's head and stomped on it. Not forcefully, but by trickery he took over the universe. There's a difference. And he covered the universe in 2 steps. And Bali Maharaj, when he was asked, when Vamana Dev asked Bali Maharaj that where will I put my 3rd step, then Bali Maharaj volunteered that be put on my head, which is an act of submission. And therefore Bali Maharaj is always connected with the anga of bhakti called Atma-Nivedana. We can imagine that just like in a battle, one king may conquer the other. To humiliate that king, he will put his foot on his head. King means he cannot tolerate to submit to anyone. Everyone submits to him. That's why in the Vedic culture it was the Kshatriyas would fight either victory or death. That was their motto. That was considered honorable. Especially in fairly recent history, the Rajputs, they were famous for this. There are stories of the Maharana going out to fight and then coming back defeated. And his queens won't allow him back in. The city is surrounded by the fort gates and they won't allow him in. He said, well, let me in. I'm the king here. He said, no, you're not. Our husband would never come back like this. You either win or you don't come back. That's all. So practically they gave him a death sentence. And for themselves also, because that was the system. If they were fighting against the Muslims, then they would either, when the Maharana was killed, then the Maharanis, they also killed themselves because they didn't want to be touched by the Muslims. They lived by the principle that dishonor is worse than death. We will choose death rather than dishonor. So this is the Kshatriya pride. That Bali Maharaj, he was a Kshatriya like that and very powerful. No one had defeated him. But he was not simply a bully, he was intelligent also. He was, after all, the grandson and practically the disciple of Prahlad Maharaj, who, when asked by Hiranyakashipu that what is the source of your strength, Prahlad Maharaj answered that the source of my strength is the source of all strength, of everybody's strength, the all-powerful Vishnu. So, a genuine Kshatriya devotee understands that however powerful I may be, I must submit to Bhagavan Vishnu. Now in Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna states that anyone who thinks, Ishvaraham, I am the controller, they're a demon. But then when he describes the qualities of the Kshatriyas, one of them is Ishvara Bhava, the feeling of being a controller. That is required for a ruler. To be a very humble and flexible person is not suitable. Well, flexible maybe, but not obsequious, we should say. Which means rather he's big and strong and commanding. That's why when Bhim, Arjuna and Krishna, they came to Jarasandha in the guise of Brahmanas. And then they begged him, they said, we've come to beg some charity from you. And they quoted Bali Maharaj as an example of someone who gave charity and achieved eternal fame by doing so. So Jarasandha, he thought, these don't look like Brahmanas. The way they walk, you see, Brahmanas walk in a very humble way. Kshatriyas walk like this. And the way they talk in deep, commanding voices, the kind of voice they expect that what they say, that will be obeyed. And big, strong bodies. And even they have marks on their shoulders from holding the quiver. So I think they seem to be like Kshatriyas. And I'm sure I've seen them somewhere before. So the Kshatriyas, they have that lakshanam of Ishvara Bhava. I'm in control. You have to have that in order to be a king. You can't be a, measly little wimpish king. Mickey Mouse kind of not very sick. King has to be really impressive. Prabhavshali. How about that? Can you say that in Tamil? No, okay, we'll try something else. Impressive. Prabhavshali would go in there. So, you think, well, how could such a person be a devotee? Because a devotee has to be very humble. If he's always ruling over others and telling others what to do, how can you be a devotee? But then we see that so many of the great devotees in Bhagavatam, they are rajas. So this is possible if they are rajas, they rule just like Bharat ruled, keeping the padukas of Rama on the throne. With this attitude that I may be a great king, but I'm the servant of Bhagavan. So Vamana Dev, he stepped on the head of Bali Maharaj. Bali Maharaj would not accept to be under the foot of any king, but he would be under the foot of Lord Vishnu. In this way he demonstrated to all people for all time afterwards that however great and exalted one may be in this material world, one has to accept one's position of submission to Bhagavan Narayana. And by doing so, we will not be the loser, we will be the greatest gainer. So we don't know so many leelas of Vamana Dev. Mostly we only know this one. It's described in Srimad Bhagavatam that he was married, had children, but it doesn't go into much detail. Can anyone remember his wife's name? Any good scholars of Bhagavatam here? Kirti is his wife's name. His son's name is given as Brihat Shloka. There is another Leela of Vamana Dev told in the Uttar Ramayana. As we know that Vamana Dev sent Bali Maharaj down to Sutala. Actually the gopis, they were criticizing Krishna for this. They They were saying, we heard about you, Krishna, that in your previous lives, what a badly behaved person you are. And he gave one example that this Bali Maharaj, he surrendered himself to you, but you tied him up like a crow and threw him down into the lower planets. So we know, you see, we surrendered to you and you're mistreating us, but we know you're like that in every lifetime anyway. So in Uttaramayana it's described that Ravana, he was going all over the universe and making people cry, that's what his name means. And he was conquering over the universe. So he came to Sutala and he required every emperor to either bow down to him and submit to him, or he would have his head cut off. So he approached the court of Vamana of Bali Maharaj in Sutala. When the gatekeeper said to him, "Where are you going? You just can't walk in like that. I'm the gatekeeper." And Ravana, this big huge figure, said, "What's that sound? Where's that voice coming from?" He looked down and saw this tiny little dwarf. So Vamana said, "You can't go in without my permission." And Ravana didn't think it was even worth talking. So he just laughed and went on walking. So he walked right past Vamana, but all of a sudden he felt this terrible pain in his backside. And he found himself flying through space. Vamana had given him a good kick, and he ended up on the other side of the universe. And so, well, alright, I won't go back there again. Hare Krishna! Hare Krishna! Vamana Dev, he's also brought the Ganga. That we have to go. Alright, I'll just tell this one. That he stretched his foot right through the universe, and then his toe, when he went right to the edge of the universe, his toe went through all the coverings of the universe. That's a pretty big area. And the water of the Karana ocean came through, and that's the Ganga. And also, when he was stretching his foot, he was going past the Brahma was sitting on his lotus. All of a sudden he saw this big beautiful foot floating through space, going past. And he understood this is Vishnu's foot. So he got his kamandalu and washed that foot and offered prayers as a sign of respect. So that water mixed with the Karanodak, the water of the Karana ocean, and these are the sources of the Ganga. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama, Hare Hare. Bhagavan is unlimited. One of his forms is time. Time is also unlimited. But we are limited beings. We're in the limited time, so we have to rush off to Darshan at the next place. So